what is in your word. We don't always see how it's going to impact us. Sometimes your truth sinks in and we begin to realize how your word can transform our very being. And so we come before you, and I ask you to accept my surrender. Keep me out of the way. Speak to all of us that we might hear the words that you have for us. That your truth would bless us, encourage us, and challenge us. And for these things, we thank you and we praise you. Amen. Yes, Melchizedek. That name occurs a few times in the Bible. Most of the time it occurs in the letter to the Hebrews. But we also find it in Genesis 14, and then we find it in Psalm 110. And I don't know that that's all that important to you. It is important that we understand who this guy is. Now, the title of this message is Bridge Builder. And that's the phrase I want you to hang on to. Because a bridge builder gives us some kind of access. When I was working with JCPenney, I did a few things right, and one of them was that we saw this new boy band, New Kids on the Block. Yeah, it is a chapter out of my life that I'm still a little bit impacted by. Anyway, so one of my merchandising assistants said, "Hey, I think this is going to sell," and we ordered T-shirts, and we ended up selling more New Kids on the Block merchandise than any other penny store. And that brought with it a lot of profit, which was a good thing, because that was my job. But it also brought with it an opportunity for 4 tickets to the New Kids on the Block concert, front row seats at Blossom Music Center, and backstage passes to meet the band. And I was thrilled to hold a raffle at the store and give those passes away until the promoter handed to me my chaperone ticket. Yeah, there was a package of 5, not 4. And I had to go with them. And then I went to the concert. Not that that was a thrilling thing for me. But then I had to escort these 4 teenage girls that I didn't know backstage to meet the boys in the band. And they were boys, I'm telling you. The backstage pass granted me access to something I had no interest in whatsoever. None whatsoever. And there were people there I know who paid for their ticket, who would have loved to have that backstage pass, that access into the inner sanctum of the New Kids on the Block. A bridge builder, a high priest, gives us access to something that we can't access on our own. The high priest takes us into the presence of the God who is over all. So let's take this passage in Hebrews and let's jump back to Genesis chapter 14. I'm going to read you a bit of this. This can be a confusing historical narrative. So try don't think about all the details. Listen for the big picture. This is when Abraham is on his way, on God's mission, toward the land, right? So there were some unfriendly kings in the area. And so we pick it up in Genesis chapter 14. The 4 kings seized all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their food, and then they went away. They also carried off Abram's nephew Lot and all of his possessions, since he had been living in Sodom at the time. One had escaped and came and reported this to Abram. Now Abram was living near the great trees of Mamre the Amorite, the brother of Eshcol and Aner. All of whom were allied with Abram. When Abram heard that his relative had been taken captive, he called out the 318 trained men born in his household and went in pursuit of them, pursuing them as far as Hobah, north of Damascus. He recovered all the goods and brought back his relative Lot and his possessions, together with the women and the other people. So now we've had this conflagration of armies, and Lot has been rescued, and Abram's coming back home. After Abram returned from defeating Kedorlaomer and the kings allied with him, the king of Sodom came out to meet him in the valley of Sheva. Then Melchizedek, the king of Salem, so there's two different kings here. Melchizedek, the king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was priest of God Most High, and he blessed Abram, saying, Blessed be Abram by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth. And blessed be God Most High, who delivered your enemies into your hand. So Melchizedek is not a name that we've known before this. But what we can see about Melchizedek that might be important for us in Hebrews, I want to point out two things to you. First of all, he was the king of Salem. Now that sounds very much like Shalom, which is the Hebrew for peace, and also Jerusalem, which was the center of the kingdom. And so we know that this Melchizedek probably carries these two characteristics in his deportment. He is the king of peace. But it also says that he is a priest of the God Most High. Now coming into this, we don't know if this Melchizedek knows who God is. God has revealed himself to Abram. But Melchizedek does something that is profoundly important and powerful for you and I. And that is, he bumps into a representative of the one true God. And it's likely that while Melchizedek has some priestly responsibilities and is thought of highly in his community, that he doesn't know the God of Abram. That he's not aware because God has not fully revealed himself. But Melchizedek does this. He looks and he sees. There's more here. There's more here than what I thought. And so out of his, to some degree, ignorance, but also his openness, he's a righteous man. He is a person of peace. He's not thrilled that there was a battle. And he notices in Abram a representative of the one true God. And so Melchizedek has a sort of a revelation, recognizing that there is something in Abram. He has been touched by God. And the priest part's important because it is the priest that makes the way for us into the presence of God. And if you were in the Roman Catholic Church, and this is not a criticism of the Roman Catholic Church, it is just a reality. In the Roman Catholic Church, they still practice the idea that a priest is an intermediary between us and God, a go-between, someone who is a bridge builder, who makes a space, a path, a way into a place that we can't get on our own. So knowing that, let's again listen to Hebrews chapter 5, verses 1 through 10. Every high priest is selected from among men as appointed to represent them in matters related to God, to offer gifts and sacrifices for sin. Here it is, folks. Jesus Christ has been elected and represents us in the matters pertaining to God. He offers himself to us as a bridge builder. Because we might not see that we need a priest, but we do know this. We cannot enter into God's presence all on our own. Can we? Let's think about that. You know, as a pastor, I hear this, and it's heartbreaking to me. When someone's at a hospital or someone's nearing death, usually, I sometimes ask them questions about their spiritual condition, but more often, these are stories of folks that I don't really know. I'm coming in, kind of as a stranger. And they didn't go to church much. I hear that a lot. They wasn't much for church and didn't do a lot with religion. But they're going to be in a better place because they were a good person. Now, folks, I don't want to get mean, but let's think about that. If there is a better place, if we assume that God's kingdom offers to us something beyond this life, and that it is not just what this life is repeated, but it is something better, something more. Otherwise, why would we want to get in, right? So if God offers us a place at a better place, a place in his kingdom, a time to connect with him completely, have I really been good enough? What does it mean to be good enough? I mean, if I do a quick review of my last couple of days, I can think of a few good things that I did, and I could hope that those would be sufficient to gain me access to God's presence. But if we're honest about it, even the fact that we say, well, we think they're going to a better place, and we're fairly certain they'll get there because they were good people, we're suggesting that it is not just everybody goes in and everybody continues on, that there is something different, something unique, something reserved and special about the presence of God. The high priest takes us into the presence of God. Now the scripture continues. I want to pick up in verse, I think it's 13. Verse 2, chapter 5. This is talking about Jesus now. Forget Melchizedek. Think about Jesus. Able to deal gently with those who are ignorant and going astray, since he himself is subject to weakness. So, here's a dichotomy. Do I see myself as adequately able to enter into the presence of God like the high priest could be? In other words, do I think that in matters related to God, I'm on my own and I can do it all myself? Or, and this is where I come down, I am ignorant and often going astray, subject to weakness. That's the truth of my human condition. That I am ignorant, often going astray, and always subject to weakness. And so I need some help to get there. I need some help to get there. And verse 3 says, this is why he has to offer sacrifices for his own sins, the high priest, as well as for the sins of the people. No one takes this honor upon himself. He must be called by God just as Aaron was. So Jesus is called out by God. He is named as the go-between. God has decided that in his kingdom, Jesus is the high priest, the one that represents us, that takes our case in, that says, listen, God, I know that Russ stumbled and fell on that, and I know that he didn't get it when we were trying to tell him this thing, but trust me, I can work with this guy. I can help him. I can make him become something that he isn't right now. Let's give this person, let's give this guy, Russ, another chance. Let's keep working with him. That's what the high priest does. So Christ did not take upon himself the glory of becoming a high priest, but God said to him, today you are my son, and I have become your father. And he says again in another place, and this is where Melchizedek comes up, you are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. During the days of Jesus' life on earth, he offered up prayers and petitions with loud cries and tears to the one who could save him from death, and he was heard because of his reverent submission. And although he was a son, he learned obedience from his suffering. And once made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation for all who obey him. One last thing. A couple of summers ago, Lynn and I we drove to Alaska, and on the way back, we stopped at a national park in Canada called Yoho National Park. Yoho National Park is not a highly populated park, and it's a fairly remote park. And there was a hike in this park to a geological feature called a hoodoo, and we've seen them before, but we were really taken with this particular hike. It was a strenuous hike, and it was not one that very many other folks took, and so we decided we wanted to do this hike. So we find our way down, which is not an easy place to find. It's supposed to start at this campground at Hoodoo Creek. Well, Hoodoo Creek Campground, we find out, has been closed for two reasons. One, the creek got a little bit bigger than a creek, and two, there was a forest fire in the area. So first the campground burned out, and then it was flooded, which sounds like an ideal place to take a hike, right? Trust me, we were going to higher ground. We weren't going to stay down low. The hoodoos were up high, quite a bit of elevation. So we get there, we figure out a place to park because there's not really anybody around, and there's this kind of sign, and I say kind of because it was handwritten, bridge out, go back. And you all know that that's exactly what I did, right? Listen, Lynn was in on this too. She didn't want to turn around either. So we say, so we arrive at the bank of Hoodoo Creek, which with rainfall and glacial melt-off is now pretty much a roaring river. This is not a creek. And I can tell that it's angry, and I can tell that it's swift, and I can tell that it's cold. And all of those things will kill anyone that gets into it. It was clearly not a stream that I would try to ford on my own. It needed a bridge. You couldn't wade across. You couldn't swim across. And there was no bridge. And the bridge that might have been there was nowhere to be seen because it had been taken away with the flood. And we stood at the edge of this creek thinking, I want to do the hike. So then I spent about an hour negotiating and manipulating giant pieces of wood, trying to get them over the creek to establish a bridge that we might get over on. As we got one in, and it landed, and it looked fairly solid, after a few moments, it was washed away. And I began thinking, I need not only a bridge to get over, I need one that's going to stay there for my return trip. Because I've got to get back as well, right? So first revelation, standing there, there is a river between myself and where I want to go. And I can't get there without a bridge. So it is with the kingdom of God. There is a place in God's company, in God's arms, around God's table, in God's living room. There is a place that we want to get to. There's a place that we know holds wonder and excitement and challenge. We know that there is more to life than just what we can see and touch physically. We know that this is an amazing kingdom. When I said to you that this national park was in Canada and it had these hoodoos, your mind didn't go to a simple black and white scene. You saw color and beauty and challenge and excitement, and that's the way God's kingdom is. But just as Hoodoo Creek had gotten way too big, and it would not have been safe for me to try to cross that creek on my own, I needed a bridge to make it. So we need a bridge into God's presence. That's the role of the high priest, to get me there. But the second piece is, I had this moment of revelation that we needed a bridge to stay until we came back. And we did. But when I got finished with that bridge and we got back to our car, I was faced with a little bit of a dilemma. Do I leave the bridge there? Because there could be other hikers behind. And I had to consider, I'm not a bridge builder. I don't know what this river is going to do. I have no idea what the next flood could be. If I leave a bridge in place that is rickety at best, if I leave a bridge across this river and someone else hikes up to it and has no idea that I don't know how to build a bridge, what if someone comes to that bridge and thinks they can cross that creek and falls in the creek and dies as a result? I realized I had to get rid of that bridge. As much work as it was to get that thing put together, and understand, bridge, use that word in quotes all the time around us. It was not a bridge. It was a few logs and a few other logs and some rocks and stuff, but I had to destroy it because I knew it was a one-time use. Too often, we allow ourselves to go through our faith life with a God, get me across this one. Get me across this one. Get me across this one. Thinking that we can build bridges, or listening to somebody else's idea of a bridge, that it's going to be okay, that we'll make it. When in reality, what I need the high priest. I need Jesus. Because the bridge he made for me into God's kingdom, into God's presence, that bridge is absolutely rock solid. Because Jesus knows my weaknesses. He understands that I can be easily distracted by glittery things in this life. He understands the things that will cause me to fail. and he understands what my strengths are as well. The bridge that Jesus builds for me into God's presence, into God's kingdom, is one that is more than just a one-time use. It's not a rickety structure put together for whatever happened to be there. It is a welcoming, perfect, wonderful bridge that allows me access into God's presence. Me, not everybody, me. And I don't have to worry about whether the bridge is solid. I don't have to worry about somebody coming behind me. Because as I move into God's kingdom, one of the things that we learn is that the bridge builder stays at the river. That Jesus doesn't get me into the kingdom and say, that's good enough, my work is done. I got Russ and Lynn in, they were my responsibility. I'm going to go back to the kingdom and hang out with the people that came in. If you imagine the high priest as a bridge builder, and you imagine Hoodoo Creek as a place that is overrun with water, and fairly dangerous and cold, and if you imagine that getting to those hoodoos is really worth getting there, and it's a desirable place, then imagine this, that Jesus himself stands at the edge of Hoodoo Creek, and he knows the river is a torrent. He understands that there's been a fire in the past and there'll be a flood in the future. But he also knows that I can't get there on my own. That I have no business trying to build that bridge. And he brings me into the kingdom. And so Jesus, the great high priest, Jesus, the bridge builder, is the one that goes beyond a single access. You know, I had a perfect pass to the New Kids on the Block backstage experience that I had no interest in it whatsoever. And that was completely wasted on me. Completely wasted. But it was a one-time use. That band has come and gone, and that concert has come and gone, and it's all in the past. But God's kingdom is present, and it's real. And I'm given the opportunity every moment of every day to enter into that kingdom. What I have to do is trust that Jesus gets it, that he is the bridge builder, the one that gives me access to God's kingdom. I'm going to invite you to pray with me. First, let's just confess the rickety bridges that we build as excuses to make it seem like we can get there on our own. Father, we confess to you that just like Lynn and I stood at the edge of that creek trying to scheme a way to make a bridge across it, we confess to you that in our own lives, our giving and our serving, we make excuses for Bible study and lack of prayer, saying that we do other things. In our own minds, we believe that the little bridges we're building, the times that we don't commit ourselves to being witnesses, the times that we fail to pray, become too busy to be involved in Bible study, the kind words that we leave unspoken, remind us that on our own we can't get there. We need a bridge builder. And so we come to you today. We thank you that you sent to us this image of a high priest, one who will bring us into a kingdom of righteousness where good things are real and to a place of peace. We ask, Father, that you would touch our hearts with these things. Bless us. Amen.